Be seated. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God. Brothers and sisters in Christ, we have just heard the parable of the great banquet that Jesus is sharing with a group of Pharisees that he is dining with. And this is a reading, as I explained, we get every year 2 Sundays before our celebration of the Nativity. So this is thematic as a part of our Advent preparation for the celebration of Christ's Nativity. And it's about a meal and food. I'm going to be very practical for a moment here. Next month, weekend of January 24th and 25th, our Archiepiscopal Vicar, Father Jeremy, will be visiting with us. He'll be here on a Saturday and a Sunday, 24th, 25th. If it's not on your calendar now, put it on your calendar now. He's a guest who comes to visit us on behalf of our Metropolitan, and we need to receive him. Now, part of what we have when he visits, of course, are meals. And the good manners in all of this, of course, is that when we have a meal, he's seated at the head of the table, figuratively speaking, and he is served first. Because I am the pastor of the parish, I'm also served with him. But there's something very important about that. That's a protocol. He's a guest coming to visit us. There is this thing within the Orthodox Church where people will fuss about the priest being first of everything. And so you will have things like a coffee hour. Everyone will wait for the priest to come out, and the priest will go through the line and get his food first. I don't do that. But it does happen. And I think a contrast that I had in seminary was this thing of 2 different parishes, 2 different priests. One priest had his table at coffee hour. He likened it to the captain's table on a cruise ship. It had china. He would come out from finishing liturgy, sit down, he'd be served a meal. That's kind of the nice part. If there was anyone new at the parish, they were invited to come sit with him at his table with the china and the napkins and all of that. He was a priest of another jurisdiction. Priest of our jurisdiction, his parish at coffee hour, parishioner owned a bakery. So every week they had donuts, fresh donuts from the bakery. And I remember this thing. Of course, it was a large parish, they had a large hall, they had a large kitchen. And something that I noticed very quickly, I served there for a year as a seminary, is that after church I would go in, and I noticed in the kitchen there was always a chocolate donut and a cup of coffee on a counter set aside. And so someone put that there for the priest. And so he would take care of his things, and when he had the opportunity, he would come and get them. That's kind of protocol stuff, meal stuff. What does that have to do with our gospel reading and what we're looking at here today? Well, as I mentioned, this story is a parable of a banquet. And so we hear the story that there is this great man who is having a banquet. And it is time for the banquet. And this is part of the twist on that particular story, is that in the first century, you were invited to a banquet and you RSVP'd. You held the date on your calendar. The banquet's on this particular date. But because it was first century, the start time you couldn't always know. You just knew something would happen on a particular day. And when the host was ready, he would send house servants saying, "We're ready to start. Come for the banquet." And so that's what we hear. And so the servant is going to talk with people who had RSVP'd and said they would be there. And they offer excuses. I'm going to buy a piece of land. I need to go look at it. Well, I just bought 5 oxen and I need to go check them out. Or I'm going to get married I scheduled my wedding on this day. Sorry, I can't come. So the servant returns and tells the host that. He says, well, go through town then and find whoever's there and bring them. And the servant planned ahead and said, I already did that. There's still room though. And the host says, well, go outside the city. Whoever you find, whatever condition, invite them to the banquet as well. So in the first century, there was this understanding of meals and banquets and protocols, kind of like I was saying here. And we can get into this thing of like clergy and who goes first and all of that sort of thing in the contemporary church. But part of the scandal of this particular parable was these are people who said they would be there. These were well-to-do people. Someone who bought land, a landowner. Somebody who bought oxen. And somebody who was planning an elaborate wedding. These were well-to-do people. And they probably would have been placed first. And that's the other thing. We often see this at things at church events. Sometimes we'll talk about the head table. Usually the head table is when you have someone like the bishop come and there's a banquet of some sort, and you have a big meal, and there's a room, and it's the table up at the front, it's the place of honor, and it tends to be a very long thing. And there's a thing of who gets to sit there or not. It was the same sort of thing in the first century. These people who said they couldn't come were those that would have sat at the head table. And there was a whole thing of who gets to sit where. And even in the meal, there were different types of food served. You sat at the head table, you got the best food, and you got the most food. But as you moved back in the room and in the celebration, you were given less food and lower quality food. And so there were those who got to sit in the back. They got to be present at the event, but they wouldn't necessarily have that great of a meal because they were that far down on the guest list. So a point that Jesus is making in all of this, and of course the analogy that we have is we're talking about not a meal, not the examples that I have of a meal, but the kingdom of heaven. Who's first, who's last, who gets in, who doesn't, what's the priority. And this relates to where we are seasonally because, as I've said in Advent, part of what we're doing is in anticipating the birth of Christ. That's his coming into history, his first coming. But when we talk about the kingdom, we're talking about the second coming. So we talk about the imperative. Who gets to receive Jesus Christ when he's born? And who gets to be at the banquet table in the kingdom? And what Jesus is saying in this is all of that priority stuff is gone. It doesn't matter if you're the rich landowner. It doesn't matter if you have the oxen. It doesn't matter if you have the big wedding plan. You're not the bad guys at this point. There's not the head table and the tables at the back to serve. And the image in this parable, and what Jesus is saying is, all of you who are in charge here, first century Palestine Jews, Pharisees, priests, whomever else, you're the bad guests here who've made up excuses. You're not trying to go to the banquet, so you don't get to be part of it. That second group, the servant going through the town, is all of those faithful of the Jewish people who have been downtrodden by those guys that were in charge, and of course the Roman authorities with them. Faithful Jews who have been waiting for the Messiah and who have been striving for it. They're that next group. And then that third group, we're going to just go outside of the city here. They've left the city. They have left Judaism, the Jewish people, and they said the kingdom is for everyone. I've shared this in recent conferences. The promise that was originally made to Abraham in the book of Genesis is that he would be a father of a great nation, the Jewish people, who would be tasked to bring salvation to the entire world. So that's what's being pointed to here. Now's the time. The faithful Jews, not the bad Jews, the faithful Jews, they get to go and they get to bring this message to everyone else in the world. And they are welcome to come to this banquet. That should be a reassurance, a hope, and a comfort for us. Who I am doesn't matter. My status doesn't matter. It's about my faithfulness. Am I willing to follow Jesus Christ? But it does get into this question of, can we become complacent? That is a cautionary thing. You can join a church. You can come Sunday after Sunday. You can volunteer to do things. But you can be complacent in your understanding of what is my place in the kingdom. Entitlement. And there can be this sense, especially with people who come from outside of the church and join the church. They'll go through the process of catechesis and their formation, and then they're baptized and chrismated, they have their first communion, and they can say things, or they can think, it's usually more on the side of thought, I've arrived. I've got the good housekeeping stamp of approval, and I'm good to go. Well, this goes to another food example that I have. An odd thing for me as a priest is kind of in this whole protocol thing, is there is this whole, well, the priest should be at the front of everything. So often I've gone to events at other parishes where there is a bishop visiting, and there's a head table. It drives me nuts because it's like, okay, there's this head table, but do I get to sit there? And it goes to this thing that's actually a little earlier from our reading. So this is something Jesus is sharing with those group of Pharisees before he tells his parable. When you are invited by anyone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in the best place, lest one more honorable than you be invited by him. And he who invited you has come and say to you, give place to this man. And then you begin with shame to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down in the lowest place, so that when he who invited you comes, he may say to you, friend, go up higher. Then you will have glory in the presence of those who sit at the table with you. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Now, some parishes, when they do this big thing, and part of the thing that drives me crazy is I'm going to someone else's event. I know the bishop is going to be there. But that parish may have figured out a plan for who is going to sit at that table. It can be the parish council chair, their spouse, the priest of the parish, his spouse. They have deacons. So I don't want to presume, well, I'm a priest, I get to sit there. And what's helped me is often at events like that, they'll have another table, and they'll say, reserved for clergy. And it takes the question out of my head. I don't have to figure out that head table stuff. This is designated, I'll go sit here. It's spelled out. But for us, going back to this parable, and this sense that we're all invited to this banquet, but we can't be complacent. It is that piece that was at the end of what I just read. It's humility. Don't assume that you get to come to the banquet and sit up front. Assume that you're welcome there. But also keep in mind and be vigilant of what you need to do spiritually to progress in your faith. Don't be complacent about your faith. There's always more to do with your faith. And the blessing is we have churches, sacraments, and clergy, everyone else here to support you in that work. So you don't have to do this alone. But if you just say, I'm good and I'm all set, you run the risk of trying to sit at the front of the table, front table, and being told by the host, well, sorry, this is actually intended for someone else. You need to go. And there are parables where people are even told, sorry, you have to leave the feast. Don't want to dwell on that. So we have this parable. It's pointing us towards the nativity of Christ and his second coming. It's giving the hope that our status doesn't matter. We are welcome to that banquet. But the caution is we have to be vigilant and be prepared whenever we go to that banquet. Glory to Jesus Christ.